Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu analysis for 8th March 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. China gives green light for first downstream dams on Brahmaputra. So till now, China has been holding off on building dams at the down level, meaning where the river transitions from China into India through Tibet. So they weren't building any dams because there were concerns raised by us stating that this might affect the flow of river into India. So there was this agreement between the Tibetan Independent Authority and the Chinese government holding off on building dams. But yesterday in the National Congress, a draft 5-year plan was introduced. In this plan, they formally approved having green lit projects building at the lower end of the lower reaches of the Yarlung Zangbo river, which is called Brahmaputra when it enters into Tibet and into India. So they were finally agreeing that they are going to build dams which might pose a challenge to the Indian water share percentage, meaning it comes from China, right? So there has to be some effect or impact on the flow of river into India. As you know, any hydropower project or any dam that is being constructed on a river or has been already constructed has and have had an impact on the flow and the quality of the water flowing through the river due to the construction or post construction effects. So there is going to the impact of these type of dam construction on rivers of Brahmaputra at the upper reaches will certainly have an impact on the water flow or the water quality that flows into India through Tibet. So what is the current plan that they are implementing? So a draft outline of the new 5-year plan for 2025 and a long range objectives through the year 2035. So they have introduced a document in the Communist Party controlled conference stating that we have two documents, that is for next 5 years and the long objective like our vision 2030. So they have also a vision for 2035 where the Chinese government is envisioning a tech supremacy state, meaning they want to convert China into a supreme technologically advanced country, better than the West and better than the Russian technology also, because they are trying to achieve tech supremacy over there. So coming back to the projects itself, the inclusion of projects in this draft proposal suggests that authorities have given the go-ahead to begin tapping the lower reaches for the first time, which marks a new chapter in the hydropower exploitation of the river. So let me give you a brief history on the how Chinese exploits waters or rivers that they share with other countries. So let us take other Asian countries like Thailand and Myanmar and every other state. So whenever any river that flows from China into these particular countries, they have always ensured that the water level is being controlled by Chinese respectively. For let us take with certain examples of Vietnam. In Vietnam, whenever there was so China uses hydropower projects as a threat over other countries because they can control water flow and water level in these hydro projects. China doesn't build small hydro projects. They build big dams and big hydro power projects. So this will certainly have an impact on the downstream states or downstream countries. So particularly India has expressed concerns to China over the 4 planned dams on the upper and middle reaches of the Brahmaputra river. But at the same time, Indian officials are also optimistic that the entire water stream that Brahmaputra receives from China is not that significant because India has around 35% of its basin is in India. So whatever the effect that Chinese dams are going to have on the flow of Brahmaputra, it is going to be limited in nature. But nonetheless, dams at the lower reaches, that is the Great Bend, have raised few concerns or fresh concerns because of the location across the border from Arunachal Pradesh and the potential impact that it is going to have immediately post downstream. Meaning, if let us say if the entire Brahmaputra stream river is not being affected, at least whatever the branches of the river that have close connection to India will certainly have certain impact of because of the construction of such dams. So we have to wait and see how this this will develop in the future, and what objections India might raise either directly through the Chinese or through some other international forum, because our ties with China currently are at lowest they have ever been. Coming to the next article, Maharashtra leads surge in cases across 6 states. So it seems that we are teetering at the edge of, or at the beginning of, a second wave of coronavirus in at least certain states. And leading in the pack is Maharashtra, followed by Kerala, followed by Punjab, then Karnataka, Gujarat, and finally Tamil Nadu. So these 6 states are reporting high number of COVID cases daily. These 6 states alone contribute around 84% of total cases on a daily basis. So this shows that these 6 cases have a resurgence in increase in infection rates or transmission rates. So it is up to these states along with central government to coordinate either they are vaccines are available right now. So it is up to the state governments and the central governments to increase the speed of vaccination or inoculation drive in these states to control the infection rates or transmission rates in these states. So we cannot now complain that there are no vaccines and there is no cure. We have vaccines now, and we have to ensure that no second wave of coronavirus or the second wave of coronavirus is reported in India. Particularly these 6 states, particularly in the case of Maharashtra and Kerala, the percentage of cases on a daily basis has been incrementally increasing, which is a cause of worry. Now we have to ensure that whatever the upward trajectory that they are displaying in daily cases is controlled immediately, either through vaccination or through implementation of certain lockdown measures in respective areas. Coming to the next article, now an expanded horizon of surveillance. So the Indian Cyber Crime Coordination Center, which comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs, has launched a new program called Cyber Crime Volunteers. The aim of this is to allow citizens to register themselves as cybercrime volunteers in the role of unlawful content flaggers. So what is the problem with this? According to the official website of National Cybercrime Reporting Portal, the program is to help law enforcement agencies in identifying, reporting, and in removal of illegal or unlawful content online. So the government is planning to introduce a human or a public citizen element into prevention of crime, or at least take their help in addressing unlawful content that is being hosted on certain websites. Either it may be social media websites, or it may be entertainment websites, or OTT platforms, anything. So they want to ensure that they take the help of common citizenry who register themselves as volunteer in flagging explicit or illegal content. Now the intention of this program is to be launched all over the country, but it is going to have its test in Jammu and Kashmir and Tripura. So 2 union territories and 1 Tripura. So now comes the question, is this a form of surveillance? Yes, this is a form of surveillance. It enables citizens to watch over one another, and it is called lateral surveillance. What is lateral surveillance? Let us understand before understanding or going to the concept of lateral surveillance, let us understand what is surveillance. Surveillance is nothing but a person watching over the actions of another person. So general surveillance, it is directly done by state and not its citizenry. Generally, governments or actors of a state watch over the actions of its citizenry or its enemies. That is general surveillance. What is lateral surveillance? Lateral or social or peer-to-peer surveillance differs from typical surveillance. It is not the general surveillance where the state or the government is watching over the actions of its citizenry or an individual. In lateral surveillance, it shows kind of an imbalance of power between person to person, because your actions are being constantly monitored by somebody whom you don't know. So it changes the power dynamic of the entire relationship between its citizenry and the state, because the state has overt control over your actions because they are constantly monitoring your day-to-day life. So it clearly indicates that the state or the government has more power over you and your actions. But in lateral surveillance, it ensures that the imbalance of power no longer exists, because it is one person watching over the other, who may be a neighbor to you or a friend of yours. So informal watching of communities by their members has been an old age part of society, and its members views it as a harmless activity. So if you are aware of surveillance, you would have heard a concept called neighborhood watch. So let us say a residential welfare association or a residential colony is having high percentage of thefts or high percentage of vandalism. So the members of the colony come together and form a group called neighborhood watch. So this neighborhood watch is nothing but the residents of this society forming a security group or security alliance, where they each other understand that we are going to watch each other's back, so that everybody can sleep peacefully. Let us say every day 4 or 5 people from the group do night rounds, just to ensure that nobody is conducting any illegal activity, whether it may be theft, whether it may be vandalism, or any other such thing that causes damage to property and people. So this ensures that around the clock somebody is watching the colony, and as a result of it, everybody trusts each other, because no individual is taking the task alone. Everybody shares the burden of looking after one another. So that becomes a part of surveillance. When a neighborhood watch is constituted, they are not only watch the colony, but they also watch for new people or the people residing in the colony. Sometimes crime is committed by their own people who are living in the colony itself, not some outsiders. So it allows that the members of the neighborhood watch are not only watching the colony as a whole, they are also watching the people who are living in the colony. This is acceptable because everybody knows everybody. You are neighbor to somebody and he is neighbor to somebody, and everybody is a group. So that is what lateral surveillance is. And that is harmless, because at the end of the day, it is prevention of crime and protection of property and people. So at the end of the day, it's a good ideology. So people are okay with it. People are okay being asked questions by a neighborhood watch, or people are being okay. People are okay with somebody constantly patrolling in your colony or stationed in front of your house, because everybody understands that at the end of the day, security of the property or people or a household is of paramount importance. That is the entire idea behind lateral surveillance. Using citizenry resources, using your neighbors, using yourself as a point of data collection or a node in data surveillance network is acceptable, because everybody knows everybody, and it is also, they feel that it is an harmless activity. But the problem rises when it is organized and state sponsored. Here the author questions the entire idea behind the registration of cyber volunteers. Why the government is asking for individual citizens to register themselves voluntarily with the state as cyber volunteers. If a person is doing on his own accord, or a group constituted on its own accord based on principles that they feel, it's okay, because it's harmless. It is citizens watching over other citizens. Yeah, there are certain pitfalls of it also, but the state is let us say in a neighborhood watch of a residential colony or a colony, the government is no way involved in the constitution of the neighborhood watch or who gets what role, because it is themselves deciding that they are forming a neighborhood watch or a committee, and they themselves deciding what role each should be playing. The author finds it a problem when the government is getting involved in the process of constituting a neighborhood watch kind of a deal for online activity. So is it one person snitching on the other? So if a person finds offensive of somebody's post, he can directly report it to the company, or he can directly flag it as unlawful, and the company or the intermediary, let us say any organization, must act upon, because he is a registered cyber volunteer. And the government is giving him powers indirectly by the way of acknowledging that he is a cyber volunteer. So this technology and introduction of technology and development of applications such as Citizen and Nextdoor are used already for monitoring people and their behavior. There are certain apps called Citizen and Next Door. These are apps that are used by neighborhood watchers to ensure that they are watching over people and their behavior. So this has already been existing, and it is already easy to monitor somebody and monitor their activity, whether it may be real life activity or social activity, because of availability of technology. And as I said, United States is no new to the concept of neighborhood watch schemes, because they have a high percentage of crimes and everybody is armed to their teeth in their country. So they feel that there is a sense of increased community policing. The community polices itself. The community forms a neighborhood watch. The community forms or hires a local security firm to protect their area or their neighborhood colony. So this is not new for Americans, but for the concept to be introduced in India, where there is already a lot of mistrust between one another, it produces a new fault lines to be dealt with. So that is what the author says here. Already we are fractured. Why would you like to introduce a new line to be differentiated upon? But this program is, and that's the government ideology behind this kind of scheme, or the neighborhood scheme that US adopts, or certain colonies in India, Indian cities adopt, is crime prevention. The main idea is to prevent crime from happening from the get-go. That is the best way to weed out any problems or reduce crime rates in any area or any part of the world. So the government seems to adopt the same ideology into the concept of prevention of cybercrime. So they want to implement, or at least transplant, the idea of prevention of crime in cyber domain by adopting certain ideologies or ideas from real crime prevention techniques or technologies. Is this the first time that a state-sponsored level lateral surveillance scheme has been implemented in India? No, Uttar Pradesh leads the pack with such ideas. So what is the idea that Uttar Pradesh has adopted? The C-Plan app in Uttar Pradesh was launched to keep a tab on antisocial elements. So it was designed to receive inputs from certain identified individuals in villages across the state. So the app, the government selects somebody as their agent or their representative or their eyes on the ground in any village or any state or any district, in a district or a town or a city in the state of Uttar Pradesh, and these people inform the government of any antisocial activities or any antisocial elements or any individual who intends to either commit a crime or has already committed a crime and got scot-free, to inform on these people to the government that yes, this area is troublesome, there is a chance that there is going to be a riot here, there is a chance that these people are going to perform or conduct a form of heist or something, so theft or like that. So the Uttar Pradesh has this C-Plan app where it hires or identifies certain individuals and entrusts them with a job of observing all things abnormal or normal in a city or a village across the state. Now, Uttar Pradesh has given these people the responsibility to solve local problems, such as providing information about simmering communal tensions or land disputes taking place in their respective villages through this C-Plan app. Now, the scope of lateral surveillance was greatly expanded during pandemic. One of the first things that state administrations or district administrations did were to tell people who had COVID, because they wanted to ensure that whoever was suffering, whoever contracted the virus of coronavirus stayed in their home quarantining. To ensure an overall understanding of how the quarantine thing worked, in my state, particularly of Andhra Pradesh, the government used to come around every day, or the employees of the state government used to come around every day and ensure that people who were diagnosed with coronavirus were mandatorily quarantined in their homes, and they used to come with a state government employee accompanied by a small police force, just to ensure that these people were locked in their homes and they were not moving around. And what these volunteers used to do is, they used to come, they used to ask the person who was tested positive for coronavirus whether he had visited any other place, or was he really staying in his house quarantining himself. If the answer was yes, they used to go to the next house, they used to visit the neighbor's house and used to ask them, did he really stayed inside all the time, or did he slip out some after some time when we left. So this was a kind of a way where they were trying to ensure that everybody was adhering to the COVID-19 quarantining protocols. and this led to a lot of mistrust among neighbors. Before coronavirus, they used to be the best buddies where I was living. The moment coronavirus hit and one of them tested positive for COVID-19, the other immediately became a informer to the government whether he wanted it or not. Because every day these volunteers used to come. First, they used to ask the person who was infected with coronavirus whether if he had gone out breaking the COVID-19 protocols. And if his answer was, he obviously answered yes, I did not go anywhere. To confirm whether this person was telling the truth or not, they immediately went to the neighbor who lives next door and asked him, did he adhere to coronavirus protocols or quarantine protocols? So this ultimately builds a mistrust. At the end of the quarantine, these two neighbors who used to be at least on a talking terms now don't talk to each other, because one felt betrayed by the other, because every day they see, that is what the author talks about here. It builds mistrust among communities, it builds mistrust among neighbors. Society is very complicated, and there are a lot of things that go into making a society or a colony work together. So if the colony is already divided on certain terms or certain ideologies or certain principles, adding this volunteer thing into the mix will make the situation already explosive into a worst situation. Yes, lateral surveillance technology can use for social control and also for social exclusion. That is what I was talking, right? Two friends became two enemies at the end of a 14-day quarantine in my neighborhood. And lateral surveillance makes it easier to discriminate between those who conform to social norms of the majority. If one person likes the ideology of what other is saying, they'll be okay with it. If the third person finds what these two were saying with, he'll definitely report it to he'll definitely use his power to flag content or say something and ensure that that point of view is not reached to a third or a fourth person. So it is a problem here. Irrespective of that, the government on February 25th notified the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code rules for 2021, which intends to expand the due diligence obligations by the intermediaries. So this particularly talks about 3 tiers of grievance redressal in OTT platforms and digital news medias that we have discussed or we will discuss in the future, because there are a lot of things going on right now because of this case in Supreme Court between the head of Amazon and certain petitioners who found a TV show called Tandav very offensive towards a particular religion or the gods of a particular religion, and the Supreme Court is using this case as a way to screen content on OTT platforms. So it is a very much still developing story or process that I intend to cover in the future once we get a clarity from the Supreme Court and the government and the intermediaries or the companies itself. And coming back to the question itself, is lateral surveillance okay in India? The answer is a mixed bag of yes and no. What are the limitations that the government is going to impose on these cyber volunteers? We don't know yet. So it is a very much still fluid situation as far as there is no clarity from the government itself. And coming back to the answer of provisions pertaining to users directed takedown, there is this provision where the user can direct a company or an intermediary to take down certain content or tweet or anything that he or she may find offensive. This gives immense power into the hand of the person who wants to utilize this power. If a person is really intent on using it for good, then there is no problem with it. But we are living in a time where people do not always have the best interests of the others in their mind and hearts. So the person who doesn't have or conform to the normal or majority view is definitely going to use it to muzzle free speech or freedom of expression. That is what the author fears, and that is what she tried to express through this article. As I said, we will be discussing in the future classes of how this OTT rules and the screening committee or whatever the Supreme Court is going to come out with through a judgment in the later classes. But as far as now, the cyber volunteers, it's a good thing on one hand, until and unless government comes out with a clear-cut boundaries for where these volunteers have, what are the powers of these volunteers or what these volunteers' actual job is to until and unless certain limitations are imposed on these volunteers, we cannot say that it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's still up in the air to decide, and it is up to you to decide whether it is good or bad. Coming to the next article, health first, fiscal prudence later. So the government of India has a scheme called Prime Minister Ujjwal Yojana. Through this scheme, LPG connections were provided to poorer families and poor households. This idea was to reduce women's drudgery and indoor air pollution. But in the recent time, if you have been really keen and observing, you have seen that there has been a massive increase of LPG prices in the last fiscal year. So it has increased by an amount of at least 50% according to conservative estimates. Now comes the question of this scheme. Since 2016, the Ujjwal Yojana has provided LPG connections to 8 million poor households to reduce women's drudgery and indoor air pollution. Now, under this scheme, an upfront connection subsidy of Rs 1600 was provided, and it has helped expand the LPG coverage to more than 85% of households. So that is a huge step, and this has ensured a direct way of empowering women, because it reduced the risk of women being exposed to health problems by way of using biomass fuels in their kitchens. Now, a survey by Council on Energy, Environment and Water was conducted, and they found that on average, recent PMUY beneficiaries consumed only half the LPG compared to long-standing regular consumers. Why only half? Because limited uptake of LPG among poor household has two reasons. There are two reasons for this half usage of LPG beneficiaries. One, the effective price of LPG is not affordable, because they are already poor. They cannot pay the full amount of an LPG cylinder. That is why they are being subsidized. But is the subsidy amount that is being provided enough? That is the main reason. Second is, many rural consumers have access to freely available biomass, making it difficult for LPG to replace it. See, whatever the subsidy that the government is providing through this scheme is uniform to everybody. Whether you come under the scheme or not, the subsidy is same for everybody. See, the subsidy for a normal citizen is 20 rupees. Let us say 20 rupees. The subsidy for a person who got an LPG connection through the PMUY scheme, Ujjwala scheme, is also 20 rupees. There is an inherent difference between a common person or a middle class person and an upper middle class person and a poor household. An upper middle class person or a middle class family can afford to forego that subsidy. But it doesn't make a lot of difference to this middle income groups or upper income groups, because the subsidy is a small percentage of what they save up on what they spend on their daily livelihoods. But compared to the poor household, the percentage of the subsidy makes a lot of impact. But since the subsidy given to every family or every LPG household is uniform, there is a lot of it becomes an issue for poorer households. Because as I said earlier, the subsidy might not be important to upper income groups or middle income groups, but a poorer household will certainly feel the effect of increase in LPG prices and the lack of compensation through subsidies. And it also inherently it was system set up to fail, because the recent increase in subsidized LPG price have made it more difficult for poor to sustain LPG use. See, why would they spend 840 or 870 rupees per cylinder when they can get equivalent amount of logs or biomass fuel nearby, which comes at a cheaper price, let us say 100 rupees or 200 rupees per bunch of logs of wood. And sometimes, almost of all the times, it is free, because they can simply walk to a nearby area and cut down anything that others are not worried about. So it is not sustainable to think that the poorer household is going to maintain with the increase in LPG prices. Now, where is the answer for this problem? The answer lies in targeting of subsidy. As I said earlier, the government currently provides a uniform subsidy per cylinder to all LPG consumers, whether you were given an LPG connection through the Ujjwala scheme or you got it on a regular basis. So the idea behind this is economically poor households need a greater subsidy to make it affordable for them to use LPG as their main cooking fuel. Now the idea is to identify the beneficiaries based on their household income. We have technology, we have social schemes in place right now where we can easily identify households who can identify to pay the full price of the LPG and who cannot pay the full price of the LPG cylinder. Now the approach using this strategy is to rely on existing LPG consumption patterns of a consumer. As I said, we have a clear case, we have all the technology, all the methodologies, all the information, all the data that we can clearly use to target our subsidy scheme right now in the case of LPG, and provide households exhibiting low consumption or decline in LPG consumption over time with greater subsidy per cylinder than sustain healthy gains. Now government has to choose between the success of the scheme or the death of the scheme. That is where it is at right now. Each cylinder costs anywhere between 450 to 850 rupees to 900 rupees depending on where you are getting your LPG. Can a middle class household afford an 800 or a 900 price per cylinder? The answer is a skeptical yes. Can a poor household afford an 800 or a 900 price tag on each cylinder? The answer is no, they cannot afford. That is why they are moving away from using LPG and falling back on the biomass fuel as their main cooking fuel. That is where the percentage or the decline in the percentage of use of LPG gas or LPG connections is being seen in the Ujjwala scheme. That is why we have to address it, and we have to solve this entire problem or the crisis. It's a crisis. You are going back and turning back the dial on sustainable clean fuel or clean cooking fuel for household, that is particularly vulnerable and poor households. So in a post-pandemic rebuilding, the continued support to economically poor for sustaining LPG use is not merely a physical subsidy but also a social incentive to free up women's productive time and reduce India's public health burden. See, the main problem of using biomass as your cooking fuel is it causes indoor air pollution. Biomass used for cooking contributes up to 30% to PM 2.0 pollution, particulate matter up to 2.5 size. 30% more than transport, crop burning or coal burning. So at the end of the day, when you look at the entire pollution map of it or the pollution share of various sources, biomass burning for cooking fuel contributes 30% of the total pollution at 2.5 particulate matter size. Now, when 30% is a huge number and it directly correlates into a bad public health scenario, particularly women and children, because children below the age of attaining school age, live with their mother in house, and when she is cooking, both woman and the child are exposed to pollution that is far more dangerous than inhaling fumes. So now the government has to decide to social invest on subsidizing LPG connections and targeted subsidizing of LPG gas connections, which will yield rich dividends in the year ahead, though a healthier and productive population. So that is what the author says here. You have to address this crisis by ensuring a targeted approach or targeted subsidy to households which are in need of these subsidies. So it has to be very quick and fast-paced approach to solving this problem, because the longer you let this go, the tougher it becomes to solve the issue. Into the next article, Janashadi is helping the poor, says Modi. Yesterday, Prime Minister urged people to buy affordable medicines from Janashadi Kendras. Yesterday, he inaugurated 7,500 Janashadi Kendras and through a video conference, and he said that people must ensure that they buy medicines from Janashadi Kendras because these medicines are same as the one that you get at a pharmacy but at lower prices, and these medicines medicines that are sold through these Janashadi Kendras are safe. So the Janashadi Yojana is being is kind of turning into a friend to poor and middle class families. One of the biggest problems with our healthcare sector, that is private healthcare sector, is our out-of-pocket expenditure to fulfill pharmaceutical needs. A family or a person who is in the hospital spends more than 70 to 80% from his pocket to meet pharmaceutical needs, meaning to buy tablets or tonics or any other things. Now he's trying to ensure that he's addressing the need that you can buy Janaushadhi medicals or medicines at Janaushadhi Kendras, and this will directly help poor people and middle class people because the medicines of the prices is low, yet the medicines are the same. They just don't have the company logo on it. The scheme that covers this is Pradhan Mantri Bharatiya Janaushadhi Prayojana. That is the scheme under which Janaushadhi centers are run, and providing affordable medication to poor and middle class income groups or in families, force accessibility to medicines to poorer families and middle class families, and it will directly reduce burden on their medical expenditures and their healthcare, and will certainly meet their healthcare demands at lower prices. Coming to the next article, all women crew of SCI vessel makes history. It is the first time in maritime history that a ship is being sailed by only women officers. So, to acknowledge the efforts of women in breaking down the stereotypes in erstwhile male-dominated maritime sector, Union Minister has flagged off an all-women crew on-board Shipping Corporation of India vessel called MT Swarna Krishna for the first time. Though the vessel was virtually flagged, it is the first time in maritime history that a ship is being sailed by only women officers. This is in particularly in regards to celebration of International Women's Day on March 8th. This is the first time, I repeat, in maritime history that a ship is being sailed by only women officers. Coming to the next article, just before going that, the important name here to remember is, what is the name of the vessel? It is called Swarna Krishna, MT Swarna Krishna. Coming to the next article, India China need enabling conditions to settle dispute. Yesterday, the Chinese foreign minister said that India and China need to create enabling conditions for settlement of border dispute or boundary dispute. And even he reiterated China's view that the rights and wrongs of the last year crisis were clear. Here, the statement is saying two things. One, India cannot hold on to the border forever. It has to engage with China on other fronts also, particularly the economic front. And he also said that he is directly blaming India for current border or boundary crisis between both the countries. That is the statement is indirectly saying here. He also further said that the China-India relationship is essentially about how the world's two largest democracies or developing countries get along and pursue development and rejuvenation together. Again, reiterating the stand that India has to let go of the boundary situation and re-engage China economically, irrespective of what the boundary situation is or situation at the border is. But India sticking to its gun, we have to give props to our External Affairs Ministry or Minister of External Affairs here, because it has clearly conveyed a different message underlying that without fully disengaging along the LAC and then de-escalating their positions in the Ladakh area, restoring normalcy in the relationship would not be possible, because they are saying China is of the opinion that irrespective of how hard the border is, India and China must engage economically. India is saying first disengage, then de-escalate. Then we'll talk about economic ties between India and China. Coming back to the Ladakh situation there is no official word on progress in Gogra Hot Springs and other areas in Demchok. 10th level Corps Commanders meeting was held on February 20. We don't know the outcome of that meeting because it hasn't been released yet. But according to unofficial sources, the situation is still volatile in Gogra Hot Spring areas and the Depsang Plains. But before that, you have to know that whatever the Ladakh situation in Pangong Lake area has occurred, it has been long running between both the countries. The issue of patrolling has been a point of contention between both the countries. If you have watched online videos where both soldiers were throwing rocks at one another, were pushing each other or shoving one another, you can understand that the point of patrolling in Pangong Lake area and other areas have been always a point of contention between both the countries. Until and unless you solve the patrolling issues and you settle the dispute boundary issues, or at least come to an understanding of whatever the respective perceptions of LAC is, along with a staggered disengagement and de-escalation process, the border area between India and China is going to be hot as hell in the future. Again, coming back to the Chinese envoy here or minister here, he is saying that we should intensify cooperation instead of harboring suspicions of each other. The statement is laughable at least because you know who has been the aggressor and the world knows who has been the aggressor here. And for them to say this statement is a little bit hysterical in nature. Coming to the next article, Saudi-led coalition jets pound Sana. So, in the future we will be discussing a little bit more about war situation in Yemen. But understand this, Houthi rebels who control large swaths of area in Yemen are using their bases to attack oil refineries of Saudi Arabia. So yesterday Saudi Arabian military intercepted at least 10 drones that were on their way to attack refineries or other civilian positions in Saudi Arabia. As a retaliatory measure, Saudi Arabia started bombing and conducting air raids on Sana'a, which is unofficial capital of the rebels or Houthi rebels in Yemen. It is unofficial in the sense that the international community does not recognize it, but in reality Houthi rebels control Sana'a and they themselves declared it as their capital. So since the Biden administration withdrew its support to Saudi Arabia in Yemen war and removed Houthi rebels from an international watch list or a terror list, Saudi Arabia has stepped up its offensive in Yemen. This directly, at least there was hope of a peaceful resolution till now, but since both sides, Houthi rebels and Saudi Arabia are going at each other with full speed, now there is a little chance of peace talks, because these people have Saudi Arabia claims that they have intercepted 10 drones launched by Iran-backed rebels, and so the Houthis are saying that the Riyadh government, that is Saudi Arabia or Saudi-led coalition, has been continuously bombing their positions in capital of Sana'a. Now the situation in Yemen is as fierce as it was, and the fighting between groups that are pro-government and anti-government with added catalysts of Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and some other international organizations is pouring fuel into an already fiery situation, and it is a still developing situation. In the future we will be discussing about Yemen war in detail. Thank you for watching. Hope you really like these videos. Thank you. Have a good day.